This is Via Voices, the podcast that brings you insights from the champions of international education. I'm your host, Brooke Roberts, and together we'll uncover the stories behind impactful global learning experiences and the professionals who make them possible. Today we're talking with Nick Gozik, Dean of Global Education and Assistant Professor at Elon University.
We have an AI initiative on our campus, and we are going to list the top 20 things that we think we can do with AI.
From a surprising start at Xerox to leading one of the nation's top global education programs, Nick shares the story behind Elon's impressive 90% study abroad rate and the insights he's gained along the way. Hi, Nick. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. You're our first interview.
Okay.
So, it's going to be fun. We're going to experiment together.
Yeah. No pressure.
No pressure at all. So first, I always love to hear how people got into international education. How did you find yourself into our little world?
I feel like I could probably talk for the next 30 minutes on this, and I'll try not to do that. I don't know that as a kid that I knew that this is exactly what I wanted to do, but I was born in Australia to American parents. And so I spent the first couple of years of my life living elsewhere. And I think what that did is when we moved to the United States, I had to think about different seasons, and I went from summer to summer, and I for some reason that I think kind of opened up my world. Other little kids, when they're growing up, they count sheep when they're about to go to bed. I went through the world capitals and then U.S. capitals. So I don't know. There was always something about me that saw a bigger world and was excited about that. Fast forward, I ended up doing a master's degree in Paris, and I did a turnabout. I was in technology, IT, and I decided I wanted to do something different. And I put in applications, and I decided to go. I did NYU in Paris, and it again just changed my world.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people that enter this field do so because they had some kind of transformative experience.
Yeah.
And for me, that was living with people in a different city where I actually felt more like myself than any other time.
That's interesting.
And I ultimately decided to enter the field and to be able to support others doing that work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I want to know more about, so when you went to Paris, were you studying IT at NYU or?
No, I was a history major as an undergraduate.
Okay.
And somehow I got hired by a tech firm, and then I went to work for Xerox for I did 2 years, and I actually really liked it.
Yeah.
I liked the people I worked with. But there was something about, I kept looking at my clock at the end of the day to say, okay, do I want to do this for the next 40 years?
Yeah.
And then I kind of just decided to start applying to see what was out there.
Yeah.
And so one of the questions that I think will come eventually is what would I recommend for others? And I do think it is do what you love and what you're excited about.
Yeah.
And then everything else will follow. The money will follow. And so when I went to study in Paris, I studied French language and civilization, and it was mind blown.
Total curveball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah? And I would say I was working at Xerox at the time, and everyone was so excited for me that they got this giant sheet cake, and they gave me luggage, and they gave me all this stuff because they were like, you're living the dream. You're going to do something different. And so, yeah.
That's so cool. So you're at Elon University.
Yes.
Tell us more about what your role is there and sort of what is Elon working towards right now when it comes to your global strategy and process and everything.
I don't know that everyone knows Elon University, but Elon is really a special place, and more than I even knew when I applied. Elon has been number one for study abroad for 18 years.
Yes.
This last year, we slipped to number 2 because of 6 students. But we had 94.3% of our students go abroad according to Open Doors.
That is crazy.
It's crazy, right?
It's crazy.
So when you walk around campus, almost everyone you meet will have gone abroad for some period of time. And so we're known for study abroad, but it's beyond that. It's literally every aspect of our campus.
Yeah.
Faculty are passionate about this work. We are number 1 for undergraduate teaching in the country. So the quality of what happens in the classroom, we're number 11, 12 for innovation. We're all about experiential learning. So I came to Elon, knowing some of that, but what I find is that it's a place that is totally about global, but at the same time that there's still more that we can be doing. So right now at Elon, we've just finished a global strategic planning process, which took, I think, like 2 years. But like through that process, we spoke to over 300 people, faculty, staff, students, about what they wanted moving forward. And the questions we asked is, what do we do really well? What are we already doing? What do we do well? And the second is, where can we innovate? Where can we be at the forefront? So that work is incredibly exciting.
Yeah. I'm curious, do your students know that they're at such a special place? Obviously nationally, that number, it's less than 10%. So do they know that they're part of this very special environment? Like in the recruitment process for admissions, do they hammer that in the...
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, they know that study abroad is big. It's the number one or number two reason why students come to Elon.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like in terms of admissions and kind of selling point for the institution. But I don't know that they know. I think we kind of take it for granted on our campus. And also the openness of our faculty to not just sending students abroad and going abroad, but I would say the intentionality behind what we do. So, for example, one of the things that I created when I got to Elon was a global pedagogy workshop. And so we used to meet with faculty leaders every August during planning week, and we would go over the nuts and bolts for leading short-term programs. And I came in and I said, I think this can go deeper than that. And so the first time we did this, we brought in colleagues, and I had just written a journal article with a colleague from Smith College about faculty as learners. And so like, what do faculty gain by being abroad? What do faculty gain in terms of their pedagogical practices, about their own exposure? And through that experience, we did a whole global pedagogy workshop, focused on that. And since then, we've had a number of really like amazing speakers. And so like what you find and what I think we take for granted is actually the depth that our faculty are willing to go. And there's like this hunger, there's like this desire to be able to really kind of push our students and push our faculty to not just go abroad, but to do it in a way that is value added, that keeps in mind the local communities, that is looking at inclusion. And so that's something that I think people may not know about in Elon University.
That's interesting. So I feel like, Elon, I've known about Elon as like the creme de la creme, the university to mirror. I mean, people have got to be wondering right now listening to this, like how do you get like 95% of students? Like what's the secret? Is it an endowed funding situation? Is it just more the program model types that you're using? How do we get to 95%?
Yeah. Well, and I'll say I came from other global institutions. Like I did my graduate work at NYU. I was at Duke University. I was at Boston College for 8.5 years. Like all of these places that are known for being global. And Elon, I think there were a couple things that came into play. So about 25 years ago, Elon was really a regional institution. And people kind of knew about it. Leadership at that time, though, decided to really have like a different kind of vision. And that vision was about professional development, career, experiential learning, service, leadership, undergraduate research, and study abroad was part of that. And at the same time, the institution, a little bit before, shifted the academic calendar. We went from being kind of semesterized to this, you take 4 classes, you take 1 class, and you take 4 classes. So this true J term. And that made a difference because that meant that all of a sudden faculty had space to be able to take students abroad. And then at the same time, fundraising, is what you mentioned, Brooke, is really important. Like the university just put this in the strategic plan. So I have over $1 million every year to give to students for study abroad.
Wow.
And that it was like 5 times what I had at my previous institution. That was a much better funded institution overall in terms of endowment. So people are always asking and like, how do we get there? And I can't take credit for how we got there, but I can say that the intentionality, like the planning, is more than I've seen anywhere else.
Right.
It's amazing.
Well, what I love about that too is that clearly it's not just the money. Right? The money is obviously a huge catalyst and it's a tool, but even with that amount of money, if you hadn't sort of invested in the faculty, getting them thinking about this in a more meaningful way, it probably still wouldn't have
Yeah.
You can't just always throw money at the problem, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about technology, the future, and sort of the future of our space. It's always been a very visceral, on the ground, get your hands dirty kind of experience traditionally.
Yeah.
But obviously technology, plays a big role in all of our lives. And so it's obviously going to impact international ed. How have you been leveraging technology at your institution and your work to expand global opportunities or to make your office more efficient, anything that you've been really looking at technology?
Well, and it's a perfect question coming from you via TRM. Like it's what you do, and you're making people's lives easier because of that work. And I think sometimes people are resistant to technology or change, and I never quite understand that actually. I started off, as I mentioned, in tech, like in IT, and through that process, I continue to learn and absorb, and I appreciate what's possible as a result of that. At Elon and at other places that I've worked, it sounds simple, but like even just having applications in a system, like I've been at places where there were paper applications.
Same.
When I got to Boston College, one of the very first things I did was move over to an application database. I've given presentations on this in the past, and I think we'll probably talk more about data as well and data analysis. But when you start having a system that integrates with a home institution's overall student information system, the power of those data are incredible. And often I think what we find is that we're sitting on mounds of data that we don't even use and we don't even tap into. So having an application system is not just about the applications. It is a centralized place that is really powerful in terms of data. I think moving forward, and you and I talked about this not too long ago, like we were part of a conversation with other colleagues in the field, and that is also thinking about the power of AI and artificial intelligence. And it's so interesting to me when you look at the stats of like how many in the field of just in professional fields in general feel like AI, they're not quite sure about it. They're not sure if it's going to make their jobs easier. We have an AI initiative on our campus, and we are going to list the top 20 things that we think we can do with AI. And that includes, everything from question and answer to thinking about how we can use AI and technology to review our applications, like all of that people time that can be used to spend more time with students.
Yes.
And help them in an advising capacity so that when we can automate, then we can actually spend time doing the thing that we got into this work to do.
Yeah, I say that all the time. I've never met a person in our field who said, you know what, I really love working in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And I love processing information.
Some people do actually really love
yes,
it.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, they probably were like, oh, but this office does this, but I think most of us came because, again, to that, your point about that meaningful international experience we had, and we're like, everybody needs to have this. I think that there's a lot of exciting things happening with data. Let's talk a little bit about data. We believe at VIA that data is an SIO's superpower, and especially with the climate we're in right now. I think we're all kind of having to sing for our supper, do a little tap dance to prove the value we bring to our institutions. What are the data points that you find have been the most powerful in maintaining the support from your leadership of the, if it happened 25 years ago, I'm sure you've had new leadership over time. How do you maintain their support? What kind of data is most important for you?
Well, definitely enrollment data. And I think enrollment data becomes so important because they also help us bust some of those myths.
Yeah.
Right? Like where our students are going. Who are our students? Why are they going? So when we start to pull apart these data, there are times that, there's a sense in the good old days, we had more students going abroad. And it's actually no, we continue to move up in even for an institution that has, right now 94.3% of its students going abroad, according to Open Doors, when you look at those trend lines, we are sending more students. When we look at where the students are going, actually, we have a pretty diverse portfolio, particularly amongst faculty-led programs. So that becomes really important.
Right.
Who's going abroad? And so at our institution, we have a 52-point diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And so we began that work by looking at the data. And sometimes the data don't tell you the things that you want them to tell you because maybe we're not, knocking it out of the park.
Right.
like we thought that because we were doing all of this marketing, that meant that in terms of inclusion, we would be sending more students of color abroad. Actually, the answer was no. Like when you looked at the pie charts,
Interesting.
and I found that, in my previous institution as well, like I would look at the same chart in terms of gender, in terms of race, ethnicity, and so like. And people were almost a little offended. They're like, well, we spent so much time and so much effort. It's like, you did.
Yeah.
And you did good work.
Yeah.
But it's clearly not making the changes that we need to make.
Yeah.
And so I think coming back to the data and making sure that that those data can help drive what we do is really important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think particularly in terms of enrollments moving forward, and we're going to find that even more given the so-called enrollment cliff in the United States right now, particularly from institutions like us that are drawing from the Northeast and drawing from a certain socioeconomic population, and making sure that we can continue to tell our story in a way that resonates and that shows that we are value added,
right.
And that we are actually our secret weapon on campus, and don't give up on us, because in fact, we are probably one of those things that are going to continue to help the institution move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we only have a few more minutes. I want to do a couple more rapid fire questions. And rapid, we're academics. We're not ever rapid.
I could talk forever. Sorry. Yeah.
But I want to ask you just sort of quicker questions and just to see your response. I'd love to hear about the most recent book that you've read. Yeah. And has it shaped, how you see the world? And it could be anything.
I read quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like that's my secret place to go.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book right now, so it's not the last book that I read, but I'm reading by Paul Harding, This Other Eden. Okay. And I just started it, and the prose are amazing. And I say that because I know we're not on a literary, but like sometimes you actually need some like humanities in the world to kind of restore and they're just beautiful. But the message of this book is it's set on this island, this remote island, and it was founded by this mixed race, group, and it's really isolated off of Maine. And then 100 years forward, then there's this move to kind of push all of these people off the island. There's a discomfort with it being mixed race. And so like if you're thinking about what is going on now and like what matters and the resonant tones and also just like survival, I don't know. It's probably not what everyone's going to, but it's really a fabulous book.
I love that. Financial, geographic, technological, all those limitations, all those limitations were removed. What's something about our field that you would change?
I was on a lot of panels during the pandemic, and we kept saying, let's use this opportunity. For as disruptive of a time as that was, let's use that opportunity to rethink what we do. And I think we haven't necessarily done that as a field. I think we went back to doing what we did previously. Yeah. Where I think we need to go is to actually come back to the roots of like where we started. We started in the 1920s and with a certain kind of student in mind. I think it quickly moved into white, female, upper middle class, wealthy, at certain kinds of institutions, humanities and social sciences. We still need to work with the population of students, but to actually rethink and rebuild the work that we do, I think is number one. To reinvent with a whole variety of students in mind and not just to adapt. Yeah. I think the second thing that we need to do is start moving beyond study abroad and international, activities as a one-off experience. One semester, one winter term, they are part of a 4-year journey, a 2-year journey, a whatever year journey. We don't become global overnight. And so I think really kind of making sure that we think about global as part of an overall journey and that we're finding touch points at each. I think those are two things that we need to focus on.
That's good. I'm curious, how do you think international education can differentiate itself in making sure that that travel experiences are more and that can impact people's empathy and perspectives in a more, constructive way?
It's a great question. I think there's a lot of nuance, right? When we look at politicians, like look at George Bush, like here in Texas, his understanding of immigration was different because of the state from which he came. So there are these ways in which, despite we may fall back into the bifurcation of political parties, but I do think that every experience we have with someone who is different from us leads us to opening up and being different on some kind of level.
Yeah.
And we don't always get it right away.
Yeah.
Sometimes it will be that moment that will hit you 5 years later or 10 years later. And so I think some of this can be better planned programming where we create moments of reflection and we ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And that's something that we do, and we're training our faculty to do as part of the this workshop that I talked about in other experiences. But I think there's also something about life and letting people kind of live.
Yeah.
And there are going to be these ebbs but somehow that exposure I think becomes really important as well.
It's almost like you have to let the experience simmer.
Yeah.
Get the flavors going,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Last question. Reflecting on your career, you've worked at a lot of different institutions and obviously had a whole other career before this whole other life. What's a piece of advice you would give to somebody who's early in their career, they want a role like you have at Elon?
Yeah.
What's a piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for the role that I have. I'm so fortunate and so lucky to work where I do and get to do what I get to do. I think a lot of it, Brooke, comes down to patience. And that's really hard to tell a 20-some-year-old. I was probably not the most patient person. I came out of, a graduate program and I was so excited to kind of take on the world. And when I look at and I teach in our field, I write in our field, a lot of people will ask me some of these questions. And I think sometimes it is having the patience to kind of start a career, know that you won't get to move up right away, but know that, you're constantly learning and absorbing. I think it's also just being super positive. And I don't mean that in a Pollyanna way. I mean literally understanding that at each stage you will continue to absorb something new, and that will give you the nuance and the levels that will help you as you move up. And to that third point, I would say just plunge into everything. Just take advantage of everything. And know that every stage that you are continuing to build. So there's a couple of things I think about.
I'm curious, and we're talking about your career, coming from corporate world, Xerox, what's something that you learned in that environment that you have brought into your career in international ed that you feel like maybe not a lot of people who maybe are always been in academia, maybe just not be as aware of?
I think, again, sometimes we come up with these clear divisions. This is the corporate world.
Yeah.
This is the academic world. We are a corporation in many ways as an institution.
Yes.
And I think sometimes on the out, in corporate America or in other fields, there's so much we can learn about managing people. I think about planning. I think about resources. And so those are some of the things that resonate with me. The use of technology in certain kinds of ways, being nimble. But I would also argue that other fields have a lot to learn from higher education.
Yeah.
And I would say value systems and the soul of what we do. The fact that you asked me what's the last book that I read or the book that it's because those other aspects matter so much to who we are and they inform what we do. So, I've got one staff member in my office that moved over from a corporate office, and we're still having conversations about the terminology, the lingo, but she is amazing. She is so efficient and she helps us do our work in such interesting and I would say more effective ways.
Yeah.
So I hope that we don't ever get to the point where we don't bring people in from outside of higher education and vice versa, because we are literally better off as a result.
Wonderful point to end on. Thank you so much for being on the show and being our first guest of the podcast. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.